Hello, this is the Dr. Joe Show where we learn about women's health and sexual wellness. And today our guest is Rebecca Jowers. And Rebecca is a woman that I've had the privilege of getting to know, lives in Dallas actually. And I'll let her describe her background and as a young girl and going into college. Again, presumably there's mostly college women that are watching this, kind of her story coming up. But I just found it very interesting the first time I ever talked to her. But when I did, I also said to myself, the women that I've worked with and hopefully going to work with in the future needs to know this story. So, Rebecca, can you tell us a bit of your background?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So I grew up in a home with a great, loving mom and dad and some brokenness in our family, just like every family has. And I'm sandwiched between two brothers. And my dad grew up in poverty, so he was a workaholic, growing up, wanted to provide everything for his family that he didn't get as a child. I mean, they didn't even have toothbrush and toothpaste. So because of that, he worked super hard to put himself through school, through college, joined the military, got through medical school. But then when he got out, he was kind of an absentee dad just because he worked all the time. Very compassionate, became a doctor, great work ethic, but because he would, back in the olden days, they put people in the hospital the night before surgery instead of the morning of. So he was up early in the morning doing surgeries, at night going to the hospital doing rounds. So I didn't see my dad a lot growing up, knew he loved me and all, but just wasn't there. My mom had, I've learned some issues from her childhood. She struggled with rage. And so being in the home, feeling like I was walking on eggshells was a real challenge. So that's kind of the home I grew up in. And I just remember sort of at a very young age, remembering don't make mom mad. That was my life motto was don't make mom mad, just whatever you can do. And so really it was kind of an oppressive home, environment for me emotionally. Because of that. And then I had two brothers, get along great, with one of my brothers. And then, you know, moving a little bit later, actually ended up having, being abused by one of my brothers. And so that was kind of my home environment. And I'll tell you, it's one of the reasons I fought so hard to go away to college is because I wanted to get out of the house. And my older brother stayed at the local college. And for me, I just thought I cannot live in this home anymore. And so I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and got a couple of scholarships and was able to go away to school. And that was kind of my freedom of getting out from under really just kind of the rage of my mom. So that's sort of what my picture looked like growing up
Okay. It's,
prior to college.
okay. So yeah, that's a, and you've made me aware that that isn't that rare of a situation where you have abusive situation that especially a girl is under. So we can talk more about that later. But as you advanced and aged into college, what was your college years like?
So for me, it was this wonderful new freedom. There were no cell phones back then. So it's not even like anybody could check on me, you know. And I actually, I think for me, I really had PTSD. I think it was a time of healing for me. I also really began exploring my faith journey. And I got invited to a small group Bible study in my dorm room. And this girl ended up becoming a big sister to me. And I really came to faith my freshman year in college. I had an introduction to it in my younger years, but really made a decision to live for the Lord. So for me, that was a huge impact
Mhm.
in how the rest of my college years went because I got very involved in Bible studies. I was just hungry to learn more. So I went to I joined Fellowship of Christian Athletes, went to other Campus Crusade, different Bible studies. So that was a big part of my college years. I also was a perfectionist. So for me, because of my trauma, I self-medicated. I felt like God protected me rather than self-medicate with drugs or alcohol or even relationships, multiple relationships, which is what I see very common in the work that I do.
Mhm.
I was protected and I did it through sports. I was an endorphin junkie. Go work out, go work out, go work out, get a dump, get a dump, get a dump. That's how I self-medicated my own pain was through sports. I didn't really know it at the time, but even a positive thing like that can be unhealthy because I've had to date 6 knee surgeries and I'm looking at knee replacement. So, there's a thing called moderation that's really exercise is great and it's good to be healthy, but I was kind of to the extremes, pretty much all I did. So,
Yeah. Yeah, endorphins. I am very familiar with what you're talking about, and I have had that some of that, a bit of that myself, but not to the level it sounds like you have. And again, you have that PTSD issue that going that again, I'm finding is more common than I ever really thought. So with women particularly. So your college years, you're an athlete, you're very successful. What happened from there? Where did you go from there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting. My value and self-worth was in my performance, and I didn't know that's where I was looking for it because I didn't get words of affirmation at home. So I was very driven. So wanted to be make straight A's in college. I did have dyslexia, which I got diagnosed my freshman year in college. So I had to work really hard, but and I would not settle for less than an A. And honestly, I almost killed myself doing that. I spent hours and hours. I look back and I'm just thinking, I've really learned, and gosh, I hope these young women hear this. I have learned the difference between perfection and excellence. And I can't do things perfectly, but I can do them with excellence and show myself grace and be kind to myself. That's one of the biggest things I think young women need to learn is to be kind to themselves, you know. So I wasn't that in college. I was driven. I was trying to make straight A's. I was playing college basketball. I started racing bicycles. I was doing all of this, and I did get into a relationship. I dated a couple of guys my freshman year. Nothing real serious. One of the things I felt like I wasn't prepared for was setting boundaries in relationships. You know, and so that's something that I had to learn how to do, and it's very uncomfortable. And you know, Dr. Joe, probably this is a low statistic, but 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. That really sets you up for all your relationships going forward. And so I didn't have any, first of all, I didn't even recognize what happened to me was abuse because my definition of abuse was rape and I was not raped. And so to me, you know, what happened was unfortunate. I kind of shoved it in the past and went to look forward in the future. But it does affect when you're looking for affirmation and value and you know looking for people to give you that. I found that through coaches and teachers, so I really became compassionate. I was majoring in accounting and then ended up changing my major, switching to education, partly because of my faith journey as well. I wanted to help people, and so I thought, who's helped me the most in my life? Teachers and coaches. So I kind of went through that journey, but learning to navigate relationships was a challenge for me. You know, of course, nobody prepared me for the fact that when I go out on a date with this guy for the first time, he's going to slip his hand at my shirt. I wasn't prepared how to respond to something like that, you know. And so I have 4 daughters and I've had kind of some of those conversations with them. But so that was part of my journey. I ended up getting in a more serious relationship with a boy my last couple of years in college. And that was just an interesting journey. And you know, thought I was going to marry the guy. He was from Holland. And so that was kind of a heartbreak, you know, for me. But really, I ended up following the Lord instead of staying in this relationship with somebody who that wasn't a priority in his life, you know. So that was a really hard choice. But I'm grateful I did that because it really kind of set me up for what I do today. You know, I ended up graduating from college. I ended up getting married and having a family. And I'm an educator, so I taught math and science for a couple of years, and then I taught at a university, taught mathematics, and then when we started having children, I had the privilege of being home for about 13 years with my 4 daughters. Ended up going back to grad school and then starting a nonprofit to help survivors of human trafficking. So that's kind of my quick overview of my journey to where I am today and what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
At
Well,
heart, at heart, I'm an educator.
yeah, I can feel that. I can sense that without a problem. And I think you're a great one. You know, I know that you're a great one. And you know, I think the heart of your education calling and your drive probably comes out of the circumstances you've come out of as far as your youth and that type of thing. And you know, you're trying to make a difference for girls and young women in a lot of cases that may have had similar situations arise. And I'm sure there's some boys that have issues as well, probably just not the same numbers as the females on the female side. So but it all makes a great deal of sense to me. And again, that the number of 25% is pretty shocking, but it's something that, you know, obviously is part of our kind of part of the fabric really of our society. And yet most people Like I was not aware of that before you and I talked. So many of again, I've had women students and such for well, a long time, and then I've had both co-ed classes and then these all women's classes, and so I realized looking back that I probably had a fair number of them that had this experience as well, and were dealing with it, as they were coming up and through. And you mentioned earlier, being on a date and having a guy, try the typical guy things, and it might be one thing with a young woman who had never had the experience that you'd had, but a whole different story with you. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, Dr. Joe, what happens is when you have that type of a story, you lose your voice often. I had never told anybody. I never told anybody until I was in my 40s. And so you don't have a voice, and so that's something I am so passionate about, is helping survivors find their voice and find value and worth in who they are, because God created them, not because of their awards on the wall, that
Mm,
type of thing. And so that's kind of been my journey. My passion is sexual abuse prevention, educating. Like, I wished I had known more things. I Sometimes it's still, in hindsight is 2020. I think about that phrase comes so alive to me now, because I can look back and see how a perpetrator grooms someone and sets them up to be abused. And so I'm passionate about educating people about what that looks like, hopefully for the intention of preventing the abuse from happening. You can be groomed for a long time before the abuse actually happens. So part of my passion of what I do today is from my story there. And the other part is because I'm a believer, I just have this very strong sense of justice. And I didn't realize how often the word justice is in the Bible, but it's in there a lot. And lately, those verses would just jump out at me. And I realized, a lot of what happens in our world is based on injustices. It's easier to find injustice than justice. It's much easier to look at something and know it's not right. And so that's so my passion definitely does come from my story.
right. Well, and justifiably so. To not make too much of a pun of that situation, but uh with in view of everything that you've shared with us so far, for the college women watching this, what could you say as far as to them, as far as you mentioned that sexual assault prevention or sexual abuse prevention is really your passion. Is there are there things you could say to college women at the point they're in their life that would be guiding things along that line? And also, what could you say to them? This may have already happened, and they may have already been abused, but they're also, so in my I guess observation of the situation there, and again, this is my opinion, but it's also the science, that they're being abused basically now in the hookup culture, with the way the
Oh,
expectation. So can you speak to that a bit?
yes, it breaks my heart, and that is the culture. And so I would say women who have already experienced any kind of molestation or abuse are really a target for that, because they're vulnerable, and they're more vulnerable than someone who's grown up protected, sexually, and not had that experience. And what hurts my heart is, so I'll just tell you, as a parent of four daughters, I really tried to prepare my daughters. So when they were even just dating, like in nobody told me it was going to do that to me. And I remember being frozen and not having a voice. I just literally couldn't even speak. I just was so uncomfortable, and I felt horrible, and I felt shame. And so a lot of women that I know have a shame identity, and a lot of men who have been abused, and you get stuck in that. And there's a difference between guilt and shame. And I would really challenge someone who has had any type of story like this to Google Brene Brown. Brene Brown has done so much work in the area of shame versus guilt. And shame is crippling, and it's associated with addiction and eating disorders and all types of methods of self-medicating that are not good. And so, what I would say, if there are listeners who have had some type of abuse story, that I would look for help in it. Because for me, I have found freedom. And I mean, I'm married, I have four children. I'm working on my doctorate. I'm able to function in life, but I help a lot of women who can't function, and they have dysfunction after dysfunction. but I've gone through a lot of counseling. And so my bravest thing, my recovery didn't start till I was in my 40s because I never shared it. And so from a biblical perspective, what the enemy, what Satan had hidden in the dark as a secret, he had control over. But just like you're talking about the medical science of it, you can rewire your brain. I used to struggle with panic attacks and just all types of other things. And I've been just through counseling and through my relationship with the Lord, I've been healed from all of that. And so, but it's a constant journey. I'm still in counseling through seasons off and on. Different things will trigger me, but I tried to prepare my daughters. Like if they were going on a date, I remember when my daughter was in elementary school, sixth grade, seventh grade, just starting to have a boyfriend. I'm like, well, do you really need a boyfriend? Because kind of the point of that, we talked about courtship, relationship. Are you going to get married anytime soon? Well, no, Mom. And I said, well, really the point of dating is to see, is this the person I might want to marry? So they can be your friend. You can hang out. And I talked kind of more about, I tried to push my daughters to courtship, but as you're saying, the culture didn't really go for that. It is a hookup culture. Sadly, I know a lot of couples that are choosing to live together prior to marriage because they can afford to buy a house or have a wedding, and they choose to buy a house and move in together. I have a young girl that grew up with one of my daughters now that I love, but I'll just tell you, girls, it gives the boy no motivation to marry you. If you're already living with them and you're already in the home and you're living as man and wife, why put a ring on your finger? And so it delays that. And it's part of too, just the chase. Men kind of like the chase. And I don't mean that as a game, but I've seen a lot of women too that are super aggressive, and sometimes the men want to pursue you. And that's what I've seen with my daughters, that the men that they ended up marrying, I just, they sat back and they were patient. I said, allow him to pursue you. This is part of, something that there's this prize that and you can speak to it, Dr. Joe, from a male perspective, but what I told my daughters is, if this guy's I told my daughter when she was walking in the alley, this boy reached over and held her hand and he tried to kiss her. She's like, Mom, he tried to kiss me. And I said, really? What did you do? Because I'd already told her he was going to try to do something. I said, I don't mean it critically toward men, but young boys have testosterone, and that's what they're thinking about all the time. I even had my husband talk to my girls. What did you think about as a teenage boy? Pretty much all the time. Who can I have sex with and how often? Right. And so girls have to be strong enough, and it's not a critical or it's how part of their chemistry, it's part of our culture. And, it's just a challenge, but it's such a precious gift to save that, for the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. And so I think educating women and giving them the permission to say no is a big deal. Nobody told me I could say no. Nobody told me that when the boy did that, I should knock his hand away and say, take me home. I just sat there literally frozen and couldn't say anything. Yeah. And then feeling ashamed, so I would encourage women to have a voice. And Dr. Joe, the other thing I love Dr. McElhaney's book called Hooked, and it explains the physical science. When you hold hands with someone you love and trust for 5 seconds or longer, both of you start to release endorphins and hormones. So oxytocin for the woman, I don't remember the hormone for the man, you probably know. Vasopressin. So you start bonding. And it can be just through a handhold and then a hug. And then the more intimate you come, the stronger the bond is. And then when you have a breakup, it's so incredibly painful because you're ripping apart something God has, brought together that's to be in the context of marriage with one partner. Right. And so the hookup culture is so damaging. It's so damaging for people's well-being on so many different levels. So I think if people got educated on, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know why it was so painful when my boyfriend broke up with me or he cheated on me or I broke up with him. I dated a guy for almost 3.5, 4 years, thought we were going to get married. And this is before cell phones or internet or anything. He was a Dutch athlete, Olympic athlete. And I was, in sports as well. And I found out in Holland, he was actually cheating on me. A friend saw him at a track meet and wrote me a letter and sent it to me, and that was so incredibly painful. But I had bonded with this guy. I thought I was going to marry him. And it was one of the hardest things for me to get over. It took me years, to get over that relationship. And so I think now we have the science behind it to prove it. And so if we can, as women, educate and protect ourselves, but it's even beyond that. It's knowing your story. So for me, I was so hungry for a word of affirmation. If I got that, and with what I do with survivors of human trafficking, I can tell you that is what the pimps or the perpetrators do. They prey on girls who need words of affirmation. And 80 to 90% of the girls that get recruited into trafficking have already been abused before that. They're a vulnerable target. And so I'm passionate about people learning their own story, getting some counseling or help. Be bold, be careful who you tell, because you don't want to share it to the campus gossip. You want to share it to someone who's going to hold it. It's a gift to tell someone's story. You want to share it with someone who's going to hold it in confidentiality, which a counselor has to do,
Mhm.
and work on your own healing. But then, that's a big part of it. But then also having the science to back up what that looks like in a context of a relationship. I think you'll be protecting and guarding your heart if you're able to do that.
Right. Well, that was beautifully explained, and I say amen to everything you're saying there. And I mean, again, the chemistry is exactly what you're saying, and that's what I've tried to talk to young women about is the bonding process with the oxytocin and dopamine by the women is a very quick and kind of quick drying like cement, and the unfortunately the guys with the dopamine, testosterone, and vasopressin, if sex occurs, basically it wipes out the vasopressin. So you end up getting a bond there. I mean, especially, but a one-sided bond for the most part, as far as the women being much more bonded than the male is on average. But yeah, your explanation of how a girl or a young woman can say no, and you really what you're bringing out is the sex education that I hear you advocating for. That's what we're really about, what we're trying to be about with what we're doing, so really be plain spoken about it, and get past all of just the technicalities, the anatomy, the condom usage. I mean, all of that is important. I'm not trying to minimize that. The STD prevention, pregnancy prevention, all of that is important, but it's like just scratching the surface of what needs to be really understood, especially by these girls and young women, because my observation, and again, the science will attest to this, is that they end up bearing the brunt of the costs of casual sex. And
I 100% agree with that. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I told my daughters growing up is, and I found this, I remember discovering this, I didn't have sex in college, and I remember dating a guy, and I remember feeling the expectation that I would have sex with him. And so the guys that I said, hey, I'm a virgin, I've never had sex before, they may realize, oh, I'm not going to get anything from her, and I didn't get a second date, which was these are things in hindsight I discovered, didn't realize it at the time. But I remember one man I was dating, and I mentioned, I was like, hey, I think I was, just getting ready to graduate college, and I said, I just like, it was sort of my unhealthy way of setting a boundary, saying, hey, I've never had sex before. And he goes, oh, I care too much for you to do that. I don't want to do that. And I was like, what? And so
not used to
what
that.
I was not used to that, which showed me a lot about, it was like, wow. And so what I learned, not only through my own experience, but just raising 4 daughters, I told my daughters, I said, boys are going to try to get what they can. It's kind of what they do. How far can I go in this relationship? It doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they're boys and they're young men, and they have certain drives, and they get tunnel vision, so I talked about avoiding putting themselves in situations where they were alone, where that could happen. That's something, that I didn't do as a kid. And so that's why I ended up in situations in the car parked somewhere where, that's not a good
Yeah.
idea. Being in a group with friends is better. But what I told my daughters is, if you date a boy and you set that boundary, and I also told them, have a conversation with the boy. So I told my high school daughters when they were dating, and then even in college, I said, you need to have a conversation with your boyfriend or your boy you're interested in dating, and let him know right up front what your boundaries are. Kissing is okay, holding is okay, this isn't okay. So my oldest daughter, she's an attorney, rule follower. Her boyfriend waited 9 months before before she let him kiss her. So they're married. They're high school sweethearts. They were both virgins when they got married. And so it's really precious to see. Well, then daughter number 2, daughter number 3, daughter number 4 did things a little differently. I remember we were all together one time, and daughter number 3 was talking about, or 4 was talking about kissing this boy tried to kiss me, just met her. And he made the comment, wow, things have really changed in the Jowers household. I had to wait 9 months for my first kiss, you know? And so every person's going to set their own boundary. But I did talk to my daughters about setting the boundary. And I told them, and I think it's a great thing to do when you get into a relationship or you're courting or you're dating someone, up front, tell them what the boundary is and then see if they respect it. And then I told my daughters also, that's not a one-time conversation. That will be a conversation you will have to have often, of reminding them what your boundary is. And I think that the boy that really loves and respects you is going to respect your boundary. And the boy that just wants to have sex with you is not going to respect that boundary. And so I think I'm a real big proponent of that. Of, again, it's about finding your voice. I didn't have a voice until my 40s. And so I'm really passionate about young women having a voice and setting a boundary and keeping what's precious for the person they want to spend their life with, you know.
Mhm.
And if a guy's not going to like you because you don't put out or whatever you want to say, then that's not the guy you want to be with, you know.
Yes, totally agree. And you have so much wisdom here. It's a shame we can't get you in front of a bunch of college women all the time, because, and even high school for that matter, women, because I know it's the issue is there as well. Yeah, and I think while I'm thinking about it, I think it's great that God gave you 4 daughters to be able to relate this wisdom to, because I know that they've all benefited from it, but it's just, is there an irony there? I don't think it, it is, irony isn't the right word, but you know what I'm
Ask
saying.
my husband.
Yeah, he's had to live with, not had to, he's gotten to live with five women for a long time.
He's incredible. He is such a great dad of daughters. There's oftentimes he's the more compassionate one. I'm sort of the bottom line, and they'll come to me and I'm like, just go talk to your dad, you know. And so it's we are a great team. You know, we are really a great team. But sometimes like I'm a no drama girl. And so I have one daughter that would kind of get stuck, and it was always when she was tired and she'd want, it's the attorney now, she'd rehash. And for me, it's like, bottom line, here's the answer. You know, I'm done, checked off my list. But my husband's so patient. He would sit and listen and let her process. And, you know, in hindsight, it's like, I probably should let her, I'm a verbal processor. I probably should let her process more. But oftentimes I would just tell her, Amy, just go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, it's going to be so much better. Or she might be on, you know, she might be in her menses. So it's like, wait a week. I remember one time my husband walked in the room, he made a comment to my daughter and she just burst into tears, and he looks at me and I go, just wait a week, you know. So there's so many things that play into our lives as women. You know, God has created us so uniquely and complicated, and you know, hormones play in. And what I love too is to educate women to recognize their body. Like now my daughters will tell me, one of my daughters came in crying the other day and she goes, I don't know why I'm so emotional. And she goes, yes, I do. I'm on my period, you know? And so, but
Right.
to recognize, give herself grace. Okay, I'm on my period. My hormones are out of whack. Don't beat yourself up. Let yourself express that. Apologize to someone if you need to, and go forward, you know?
Right.
And I've also had the privilege of talking to, you know, I've got 2 son-in-laws and other daughter engaged, and another daughter that's got a pretty serious boyfriend. So God has given me some sweet opportunities to have conversations with them, just based on kind of how women are wired or what we go through, and give them words of encouragement, you know,
Mhm.
as they learn to relate with my daughters. So it's been a very sweet journey.
Yeah, I can tell, and they're so fortunate to be sitting under your tutelage there, because that's again what we try to do, is try to educate them, especially a big part of it is their cycle and the chemistry that's going on versus the guy's chemistry, and acknowledging the male chemistry versus the female chemistry. And you said it well earlier that boys and young men at this age just kind of, most of them just have these drives, and it's really an instinctive push that they've got that women can't understand it because they're not feeling, and they're not feeling it, and they're not looking through the same lens that the guys are. And then the guys can't understand the women because they're not looking through, they don't have that hormonal roller coaster to ride every month, so they're not
And I think
yeah.
equal education for the men, right? They
Right.
need to know this about the women.
Right.
Um, And I'll tell you, some of the perpetrators do, and that's why what they use to their advantage as well. I do have to say that a lot of the perpetrators I know are well educated and they know who to prey on.
Right. And that was,
Definitely.
yeah, that what you said earlier as far as, and you may have mentioned this to me in our earlier conversation, but I think you said that a typical scenario would be they would go to the mall and they would walk by a girl and say, "You look nice," or something like that. And ones that are like looking down, and there'd be body language you talked about that are specific to them being able to pick up on, okay, she's vulnerable, and probably in most times I think you said that they'd been abused before. So anyway, could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example I like to use. In fact, I got that from a perpetrator, from a pimp. And he said, he goes to the mall recruiting girls to be trafficked. And what he does is he says, I look for some girls, I try to make eye contact. The ones that won't make eye contact, if they make eye contact, I say, "Hey honey, boy, you're looking fine today." And if they say thank you and they're confident and they say thank you and they keep walking, he lets them go. The girls that are, oh, don't answer or look away. And so right away, he knows they have a self-esteem issue. And so he starts to get to know her and he starts telling her all the things. I mean, I could have been that girl. All the things she needs to hear, wants to hear, needs to feel valued. And this girl, it's like subconscious. Like I didn't know that I was looking for words of affirmation through sports. I didn't realize that till I looked back and thought, okay, I want to help people who help me, teachers and coaches.
Mhm.
But these perpetrators do that. And then as they develop relationships, and then now with social media, it's so easy. Hey, can I have your number? Hey, what's your Twitter? What's your Instagram? What's your Facebook? Whatever, Kick, whatever, TikTok. They get to know each other. And then through that, they start conversations and they are probing and digging to find the vulnerability. Well, and the girls will start pouring out their heart. Oh, well, my dad left. Oh, well, my mom works all the time. I'm home by myself. Um, you know, I, they will tell whatever the vulnerability is, and the pimps will fill that gap and that void. If it's a father figure, they'll become a father figure. If it's love that they're needing, they'll shower them with love. They'll meet all of their needs, emotional, and they actually study Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the bottom, food, clothing, shelter. Okay, if it's a runaway girl, oh baby, come sleep on my couch. I'll give you a place to stay. Are you hungry? Let me buy you a meal. So when that's checked, then they start moving up the triangle, and
Yeah.
it becomes to the emotional realm. And then if they can get one of these girls to have sex with them, boy, they're hooked, right? There's the bond. The girls, she will defend him in court. She will stand up for him. She loves him. And it doesn't matter, then they build debt. And so now this debt is built. He's got a place for her to live. He's buying her Tory Burch sandals, taking her to the mall. And then the next thing is oh, baby, you know what? I can't make rent this month. You got to help me. You got to help me. If we want to keep living like this, I just need you to do this one time. I've got this friend. I need you to do this one thing for me. And basically, he's going to ask this teenage girl, to have sex with his friend so he can get some money to make rent. And she's going to do it because she loves him. And
Wow.
so that's the Romeo pimp and the ploy of how they'll recruit girls. And I have a young girl that we helped. She's 27 now. I met her when she was 22. She did not even realize I was teaching and telling. She's like, that's what my boyfriend did. She did not recognize till she was about 25 or 26 that that's her boyfriend was her pimp. It wasn't even on her radar. She didn't see it
Yeah.
because of how he deceived her.
Yeah.
And that's why the definition is force, fraud, or coercion, and
Mhm.
often that's the way it happens. So
Yeah. The fraud part. I had never um entertained that idea either. You always think of force or coercion, but not
and
fraud.
it goes to that. It often starts with fraud. And then then the girl's like, I'm not having sex with your friends anymore. Well, if you don't, remember, he knows all her deepest, darkest secrets. Single mom raising a couple girls. Well, I'm gonna kill your little sister if you don't go do this.
Right.
Or, so then it progresses.
Yeah.
And that's how they get them to stay in the life. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely understand it now better than I have in the past. And we could talk for hours about this, and it'd be very justified. Unfortunately, we just got a couple more minutes. Um,
Sure.
by the limit of how much time I've got, to do this. But tell me, so the name of your nonprofit is?
The Poema Foundation. It's POIEMA
Okay.
Foundation.
And so actually, if there's young women that have had a, they're one of those 25%, they could probably, I mean, there's ways they could reach out and that type of thing to you. And
Yeah, they can go to my website. We have an info at
Mhm.
poemafoundation.org. They can email us.
Mhm.
And, honestly, we are branching out. We have a ministry where we look for missing kids. We're looking to partner with different college campuses to have outreaches there where
Mhm.
they mobilize students to go and look. So, I mean, I'll come visit you someday, Dr. Joe. Give the invite. I'll be there.
Well, I would,
But
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm all in. I would love to come and not only have an opportunity to share my story or whatever you want me to share, but also to talk about Poema and see if there's some students there that want to start a chapter. So it'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. And it's such an important issue, and it's underappreciated and under known about, really, basically, again. So um yeah, we
Well,
definitely
I
would be great.
appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing in addressing this. I needed somebody like you when I was in college to help educate me, so thank you for your work and what you're doing.
Well, I'm glad to, and getting to know you and your story has made me see even more the value of the sex education we're trying to do, and not knowing that side of it that you've made me aware of, but knowing there's a whole lot of ignorance about some really important issues, and again, especially on the women's side of it. So yeah, I feel exactly the same way about you, and I want to, if at all possible. Well, we've already started getting you involved as far as getting you connected to these young women I'm thinking of. So we'll work further on seeing what else we can do to make that happen.
Well, when campuses open up and we're able to meet in person, I mean, I'd be happy to come up and spend some time meeting with some women on your campus or whatever that looks like. So it'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Thank you very much. It's very gracious of you, and it's gracious of you to share your time today. And let's stay in touch.
I would love that. Thanks for the opportunity. I wish I could see the women we're talking to. It's my passion. I love it. But they can reach out to us through email on our website. I'll look
Well,
forward to that.
excellent. Well, again, you're doing such an important work, and there's such a need for it. So thanks again, and we'll move forward on all this.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye-bye.